Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it to our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Stacy McCuddy.
And I'm Nick Wiegand. And the conversation today is going to revolve around the idea that every parent is a home educator. And so I know sometimes we've talked about homeschooling here, and in this room we do homeschool, but there are plenty of parents that don't homeschool. And I think when you outsource that, I think some parents just remove themselves from the idea that they're home educators. So when we say every parent is a home educator, I don't want to start talking about homeschool parents. I want to talk about parents whose children go outside of the home for school. How are they still considered educators?
Because it is the parent's primary role to train up their children in the way they should go. And you're doing that, I
think you stole my Bible verse.
Sorry.
So Proverbs 22:6 is, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Exactly. I just want to make sure we round it out. Go ahead.
So you have that responsibility given to you by God, whether your children are spending their school hours in your home or outside of your home. The time that you do spend with your children, you are still discipling them or educating them, whether you're doing it intentionally or not.
I think it goes back to, even at the church, like we look to the church to spiritually educate. Like we send them to the small groups, we send them to the Sunday school, we have the sermons, and we, in a sense, let the church do everything.
Right.
And I think we do the same thing with the schools. Like it's all the schools. And so then it almost becomes a question, well, then what is just the role of the parent? Like just keep them fed, just keep them sheltered? Like there is a sense of you should be passing on to your children, and teaching them, heritage, values, the worldview, all of these components. These should be things that are coming through the home. And that's where in Deuteronomy 6, he says that, as you go along the way, when you lie down, when you get up, wherever you are, talk about these things like, that this was to be part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why the raising of a child is not just keeping them alive until they become an adult and can leave. It's in the whole point of the word, the education comes from a Latin word, which means to draw out. You're trying to really draw out what's really good in their soul. You're trying to really bring out what God has created in them. That is first and foremost the parent's job, who utilizes the school, utilizes the children's pastor, the youth pastor, whatever the church has, as those means to that end. But it's up to the parent. It should be really the one who's in charge of that.
And so when you say utilizes, you're not even saying, and I think a lot of parents may look at it as they're supplemental. When you're saying utilize, you're saying that the church and the school are supplemental to the parent's training and upbringing.
Correct. That is that the church and the Sunday school and even the public schools serve the family. It's not that the family is not just a child producing unit so that schools and churches have population for their programs.
Sure.
That's not how we want to treat it.
That's a difficult thing.
I think that's how we fall into that sometimes. We think of it that way, and that it's our job to help the school do its duty, but it's really the school is supposed to be helping the family by helping educate these children who are first and foremost, and were originally first and foremost, a part of this family.
Well, I think some parents completely check out.
Right.
For sure.
And I think that I know a lot of teachers, and I think the teachers that I know, when they talk about parents of children, just the parents that are even remotely involved, the teachers just greatly appreciate. So if the parents are supplementing the education, I think they're looked at as, good parents. I think, but what you're saying is is way more extreme than that, is that we should be spending so much time educating and training our children that the school system is a supplement.
Yeah.
Right? That's a big commitment. That's a big step. And so I think that's hard to do. And then I think when you said Sunday school, it's the same way. I, as a pastor, am not even capable to fully train anyone's children. You're the family pastor. You guys work as a team. There's no way it's just impossible.
Right.
But that's why it's not, to be clear, it's not that just that the family should spend as much or more time than the school does. It may not be necessarily amount of time, but in the same way that if well, let's take something like in the case when our son Joel, he does guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So we send him to a guitar instructor. Okay, I cannot teach him guitar. I do not know. Stacy knows music and knows how to read music. She can actually help and talk those kinds of things. I can't talk any of that.
Although I kind of now I'm picturing you shredding out a heavy metal song on the guitar.
I really wish I had that ability, but
saying.
I've tried guitar, tried piano. We know this does not go well. So I am not able to provide him those skills. Now, I am responsible, though. Is the guitar teacher doing his job? Is my son benefiting? And I do ask him, how's it going? I am involved. I don't spend the time doing this. And my part in this is actually more or less overseeing, because I don't bring anything to the table to teach him guitar.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at this that it's not just I'm outsourcing my child. I'm bringing and utilizing this guitar teacher to augment my family,
Sure.
to train my child.
So I didn't have the pleasure of homeschooling my children. I have the pleasure of homeschooling my grandchildren. My children went to public school. When we were homeschooling the grandchildren, when that kind of came into our life, my wife and I were kind of freaking out about it. And you had kind of walked us through how much time it takes to homeschool a child. Can you just quickly go through like let's just say 1st through 5th grade, the children go to school at 7 hours a day in a public school. In a homeschool environment, how many hours a day am I going to be actually educating those children?
In elementary school, I'd say 1 to 2 hours.
And so
getting at the most.
And I find that crazy, but that is across the board.
Yeah.
A same education in 2 hours that a child can get in 7 hours, and that's pretty consistent. Like most homeschool parents, that's what they say.
I was a public school teacher and I'm a homeschool mom, and I can do kindergarten in 45 minutes.
Wow.
Day.
Well, and I want. So I'm kind of keying off of what you said. Is it's not the amount of time, but
yeah.
I think there's really genuinely an amount of focused attention and quality, and it's not really a knock on the public school teachers, because they just can't do it because they got so many kids.
Right.
But it's that. So I think there's this idea of quality versus quantity that I want to make sure that we don't just brush over.
Yeah.
When we're talking about this idea. I
would love to piggyback off of what he said about kind of checking up on guitar and things like that. We treat church the same way. I don't want my kids to think, oh, we just go to church and it's no big deal. I want them to know that church is a part of our faith and that it's important to us, and that, it's incorporated into our family life, and it's not just, oh, this is what we do on Sundays. So every single Sunday, well, I'm sure we miss some, but we make an effort every Sunday in the car on the way home. We're discussing with our kids, okay, what did you learn in Sunday school today? What did you remember from the sermon today? What was your, children's church lesson about? We're placing value on those things. And again, not just saying that, well, that's just what the pastors and those people do, out there, or that's just a church thing. We're bringing that back in immediately and placing significance and importance on that. And it's just a quick and easy thing that you can do it literally in the car on the way home from church.
Right. So when when one of mine was little, we used to go on nature walks, and it seems kind of silly, but really young, we'd walk everywhere. And my daughter would ask me questions about everything. And so I would answer every single one of her questions. And there would be times she would ask me a question about a plant or a bug or a slug or something. And I would look at it and I go, I'm thinking, I have absolutely no idea. So that night I would go home, I would Google it. I'd kind of dismiss the question, Google it, go back to the same spot, let her ask me that same question. I would educate her. And we spent a lot of time doing this. And now she's going to college for environmental science. So I had the opportunity, even though I later became a single dad and we, was really strapped on time.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to really actually affect my child's education and their life. Even if I really didn't know it all, I didn't pretend I did, in the sense that I didn't make stuff up. But I found it my duty and responsibility that if my children showed an interest in something, that I would learn enough and try to educate them as much and then bring in the experts when the time was necessary.
But I think that's so good that your daughter goes to you and looks to you for the information, looks to you to learn. Whereas I think what happens when we throw it all and we check out, like, no, they educate. Well, if your child, like, hey, I need to learn something, they're not going to, I think for a lot of families, they're not going to look to the father. They're not going to look to the mother. They're going to, I need to learn something. I got to look to the schools.
Oh.
I don't find truth from my parents.
Yeah.
I find truth from the school.
Wow, you know what? You're right, because I think there's a lot of kids that if their parent says something, they kind of look at them side-eyed and are like, I need to go check with the pastor, or I need to go check with my teacher.
Yeah, my teacher said.
I need to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kids did not do that. You're right. That's a big difference. I don't think I ever actually put that together.
And it's portrayed in the movies. Like, the parents are idiots.
Yeah.
They're not the source of wisdom. They're not a source of information. They're not ones that, the child has an issue. They're not the parents are not the ones that they go to first. And it's either because they don't have a relationship, they don't see them as valuable, or both. And I think that's why when you're educating, think of the number of the kids who when you're taking kids and they're graduating, and you're asking, who influenced you the most, and they're always kind of pointing to a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which we're glad we have these people who've influenced them, but it's almost like when they mention a parent, it's like, oh, isn't that special? Look, the parent got mentioned. That's not usually what happens.
Well, I think we're keying in on something. I don't want people listening to this who are utilizing public schools or who utilizing Christian schools. I want to make sure like they hear what I said. Like I had to use public school, right? Don't check out on the conversation is that it's absolutely possible for you to greatly affect your child's life. Not to be too braggy, but my daughter, that same daughter, she's a senior in college right now, and she just wrote this paper on her, what she's going to do with her college education. And I even got a call out in that paper. Like that affected her greatly her whole life. And a lot of people may have just thought it was kind of silly, but it was really just like letting this child explore these things and then exploring them with her.
I really want to hone in on the spiritual implications of what you said about the nature walks and like how you would answer your daughter's questions, because I think a lot of parents feel ill-equipped to answer their kids' spiritual questions, but a lot of questions you could answer,
Yeah.
You knew the answers to some things and you would be able to answer that for her. But if you didn't know the answer, you went and looked it up and learned it. Or if it was something just, extremely specific and you needed an expert, then, you pull in the expert. And I think we can do the same thing when our kids have spiritual questions. There are things you are going to know the answer to, and you can, explain God or the Trinity or, salvation, those things to your child. But then if they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to, just take the time to research. Ask your pastor if you have to.
I was just thinking about
Read
that.
the scripture. In this day and age, you can just Google the answer, but make sure you're going to a reputable source. But use your pastor, use your youth pastor, use your children's pastor to help you. But then you be the one that gives your kid the answer, and don't be afraid of their spiritual questions. I grew up in a home where my parents were both Christians. My dad didn't go to church when I was younger, but eventually by the time I was in middle school, he did start coming back to church with us. But we went to church every single time the doors were open, but we never talked about God in our home. It wasn't, my parents weren't like purposefully avoiding it. Like, it wasn't like, oh, we just go to church on Sunday and we're not real Christians. I mean, they lived the Christian life, but it was just never a topic of discussion in our home. And I think being a home educator, even if you're using, the public school or, when you're attending church and your kids are getting, classes at church and things like that, it comes back to just having those conversations, like, eating together around the dinner table, or if your evenings are busy, eat together around the breakfast table, whatever, like when you just have those snippets of time where your kids can ask you those kinds of questions, or when you make, or, it's something as simple as when you are out in nature, isn't it amazing the way that God designed this bug that looks like a leaf? Like just bringing it into everyday conversations.
Right. The spiritual life being open. And And so I want to two things. As a pastor, and I can think back on times where I've had parents come to me and they're like, yo, like my kid just asked me the craziest question. And it was, super apologetic focused, right? And it's like, well, here, let's sit down and discuss this and talk. And I educated that parent. And I've thought about that. I don't know if I've ever really kind of put this all together, but now looking back on it, I was like, what an amazing parental moment.
Yeah.
Is that instead of just like dismissing it, you came and you're like, all right, educate me. I want to answer this. But I remember a lot of other ones where I've had children walk up to me and say, my mom told me to ask you, or my dad told me to ask you. And then this is like the epitome of that idea of just kind of checking out and just putting it, in somebody else's court for that education. One of the things I did in my home, and I believe you guys do it as well, and I'm going to let you guys talk on it, is in my house, one of the things that I encouraged, and we do it in the church too, but we open it up for people to ask genuine questions. Yeah. Like if doubts are there, spiritually, or if my kids disagreed with me on something, I always had it open. Like, let's have this conversation. Yeah. Let's genuinely have a discussion. And so I fostered an environment of education, which I guess, you guys are both trained in education. I am not, right? But like the idea of the liberal arts degree and that what colleges started out as is this place where you could have, engaging discussions. Like that was my dinner table, like my home. Mm-hmm. My oldest, one of her favorite things to do to me, and we're just gonna let it go, but like one of her favorite things to do to kind of get me going is she'll go, hey, Dad, what are your thoughts on predestination? Or, hey, Dad, like she'll just go through these things, but she wants the genuine discussion and we have it. But I have to be able to do that. So what does it look like in your house for this? How do you guys foster an environment of openness and dialogue and this learning, this just a learning environment?
Well, part of it is if a child starts asking questions, you're responsive instead of dismissive. Yeah. Like I said, like for the parents who like when they're getting asked a question, oh, just go ask the pastor. It's not worthy for me to figure out, so you just go spend the time. Like that's what's being communicated, whether or not we mean to. Yeah. So the other thing is to bring those things up intentionally. So even just tonight around the dinner table, before we came up here, you guys were talking about something weird. It was just something entertainment, just, some light, chatty, laughy things. And I was like, and today. And so finally it was just like, okay, we're done. I got my chance. And I was like, I wanted to bring up like what's going on with Venezuela and just like massive things happening in our world right now.
Right.
And it was also relevant because Joel, who does speech and debate, their topic has been on South America and U.S. relationships with it. So he was naming names, like he knew this stuff already.
Right.
And I was like, what? Like, how do you, he's like, yeah. And I've been like looking at the Google alerts, like looking at the articles on this. And I was like, oh, like, okay. So I brought up about it, but here we got my 8-year-old who could really, probably can't find Venezuela on a map, but we were able to talk about these kinds of things. And I wanted to bring in, I want you to understand, these are the world events that are happening during your lifetime. You may not understand the significance now, but I was like, let's talk and let's chat. And so just around our dinner table in normal conversation, bringing these things up and then able to discuss, and they start asking questions. How does this happen? And what about this? And it becomes natural. It becomes part of life.
Right.
And that's what I think the biggest key for parents, like learn to work this in to the rhythm, that if you keep things superficial with your kids, then that's the way things are going to be. And that's the way I was really like with my parents growing up. Like I didn't sit down with them and have these kinds of conversations. Sure. I would never have gone to my parents, hey, what are your thoughts about this? Not because it wasn't so much I didn't care about their thoughts. They would often not offer any to me. Like they didn't like talking about these kinds of things. That's not, there was that disconnect. So I think.
And in my home, you didn't question the parent's opinion or the parent's authority. So there was zero conversation. Like it wasn't even, there was no discussion. It was not open at all. And so you've got kind of two different extremes there.
Right.
But one thing I wanted, or actually two things I wanted to say is just the power of conversation and like, like you were saying, like how important that is. And then for me, home education is about discipleship. Like it's not about whether you're teaching your kid math at home.
Right.
Like, whether or not you're a homeschooler, it's about discipling your children and training them up in the way they should go, like we started the episode with. And, in Christian families, it's been a long-standing statistic that 80% of our children, 75 to 80% of our children are leaving the Christian faith when they leave our home. And another study shows the factors that keep that 20% as faithful Christian followers. And the number one factor is that they had family dinner together 5 out of 7 nights a week.
Okay.
And that's just astounding to me. But the point of that is that family dinner offers up those conversations.
Sure.
And that time. And again, it's not about, oh, my kid spends 8 hours a day outside of our home. It's about if I've got that 30-minute to an hour at dinner, that time is exceedingly more quality time, than maybe what they're spending with peers and other teachers throughout the day. And then just a practical issue on that is like when my kid comes and asks me a question, if I'm on my phone, I make a concerted effort to turn the phone face down and give my child eye contact.
Yeah, if they don't get that.
And that shows that their
focus,
question is important. You don't have that dismissive, attitude or just, go ask somebody else or whatever. And then another, in that same vein is that, no phones at the dinner table. Because you can't foster that conversation if everybody's just got their phone at the dinner table and you're answering texts and scrolling Facebook and, all those things. So those are two kind of practical
You pull the phone out when you need to Google
that
something.
we open up those conversations.
Right, I got a quote from a pastor that I really loved listening to, Vodi Bakum. And one of his quotes is, "If we continue to send our children to Caesar for their education, we should not be surprised when they come home as Romans."
Exactly.
And so I know that, like I said, some don't have a choice, right? But I think we can counteract
absolutely
that education like that. We can absolutely influence our children more than the school system does if we put in that effort. And then I want to also read Proverbs 29:15. "The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother." And so it's not just about discipline. I think it's that reproof. It's about that education, that training, that doing something more. And so, okay, you got 30 seconds. What would your final advice be for parents to foster this educational environment in their homes?
I think I'll just piggyback and connect with one thing when you mentioned, 5 out of 7 dinner times. I think what I would really caution parents against is, okay, more dinners together. Got it. It's not just about the dinners.
Right.
It's about the quality of the time and the conversation. So whether it's dinners provide a regular opportunity when I'm traveling in the car, like going to the store with my kids, I take them. We have these conversations. We discuss these things, and even I was saying how even today at the grocery store with Stacy, I was discussing episodes in the podcast. Like we can, as we're going along, that quality of that conversation. You don't have to schedule it and sit down. It doesn't have to be school at home.
Right.
You are the educator of the home.
Well, one of my favorite things that I took from our trip to South Africa when we got to eat dinner with, our favorite South African family was they would go around the dinner table and ask every child what their high, low, and buffalo was. So the high of the day, the low of the day, and the buffalo was like something funny that happened that day. And so I like to do that with my kids because I like the high, low, and buffalo. And it starts that engagement of the family. All right, well, thank you so much for the conversation. You can find us at familiesofvirtue.com and our podcast, Virtuous Roots, on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we'll talk to you next time.